Welcome back. Today I wanted to go through a game between Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Firouzja, which was played at a recent Grandmaster tournament, I believe in Miami, just a week or two ago, or maybe just a few days ago. Regardless, this game caught my eye because Magnus Carlsen played the Caro-Kann defense, which is something I've been working on. So I wanted to take a look, and hopefully I'll learn something during this game, and maybe you will too. So let's take a look. Okay, obviously, if you've been following along, we know that Caro-Kann is c6 as a response to white's e4. I have the board flipped, so we're seeing it from the black player's perspective because Magnus Carlsen was playing with the black pieces, and I am looking at the Caro-Kann defense. 9 times out of 10, I see, well, I would say maybe 6 times out of 10, I see d4 played here, and then I play d5. But white has other responses here, and that's one reason the Caro-Kann gets pretty complex pretty fast, because they can play knight to f3, knight to c3. I've even seen f4. There's the hillbilly attack, which puts the bishop over here. But this is the second most common response besides d5. And to all of those, I think to all of white's responses to the Caro-Kann, we play d5. I know that much. Now here, at least 90% of the time, my opponent takes this pawn and I take back. Very rarely, I think 3 or 4 times, I have seen what Firouzja played here, which was knight to c3. And generally when that happens, we take this pawn. That's what I do. And my opponent takes here. And then we play this bishop out here, something like that. And or sometimes we put this knight here. If we put the bishop out after they take that pawn, then they drop this knight back there, and then we drop the bishop back here. These are all standard moves. What Magnus did, though, was not take that pawn. It's the first time I've ever seen this happen. He also didn't advance here, hoping to run that knight off. He played queen to a5. And the game review here on Lee Chess counts that as inaccurate. When I ran this through the game review on chess.com, it said this was a mistake on move 3. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I guess the idea is that because we've played c6, it does open this diagonal for the queen. And in the Caro-Kann defense, very often we see the queen ending up on one of those 3 squares along this diagonal. Usually that's because this d-pawn isn't there anymore. Usually this d-pawn has advanced at some point, either here to support the center or something. Maybe he was trying to prevent. I don't know. I don't think this prevents d4. I mean, d3 or d4 for that matter. I think white could still play it because, I mean, the knight's still defended. And then black would do something else, and then I assume white could put the bishop right there, threatening this queen almost immediately. And it doesn't threaten anything from here. It doesn't even really protect this pawn. I mean, not any more than it was from back here, right? It was already protecting the pawn from its home square. So I have no idea what that move was about, and Stockfish doesn't either. Firouzja gets his bishop out, preparing to castle. And now Magnus takes that pawn, which, again, is very odd that he put the queen move. Maybe the only thing I can think of is that he sometimes, I have noticed, plays his moves out of order. Intentionally. I don't mean accidentally out of order, like I play them out of order, and then that turns out to be a blunder if you play move B before move A. I've noticed he sometimes will take an opening and realize that, 8 moves down the road, this queen ends up on a5 in this line. But what if the queen was on a5 first? And since this is a rapid game, I assume it doesn't affect his classical rating. So maybe he's just playing around here a little bit. But that's the only thing I can think of. He saw a line where that queen ends up out there later, but wanted to get it there first and then play the rest of the line and see how it affected things. But anyway, that's what happened. So he takes this pawn now. And of course, Firouzja takes back with that knight, as we normally do. And remember what I said earlier? If we take that pawn and this happens, then we put this bishop here. Well, that's what he does, except the difference is that this queen is here when it normally isn't. And that knight goes back to back to g3, which is what I said it would do. Now, I mean, it's defended, which is unusual in this position because, again, usually here that queen isn't there. And usually this bishop hasn't moved out by this point. But anyway, so there's 2 extra moves by the time we see this position, which I normally see with the queen still on its home square and this bishop still on its home square. But just like in the other line, Magnus puts his bishop on g6. And I'll go ahead and pop on the engine there. Is it showing? There it is. Okay. And normally what I see here, now remember, normally when I'm in this position, the bishop is still back here and the queen is still back there. Normally here, either white jumps this pawn out here, which forces me to play h6 because I'm going to have to drop my bishop back, or they usually bring the bishop out here and then we trade them off. But again, usually this pawn's not there. So this is a completely unique position, at least among my games. I haven't searched through the master database or anything like that, but just pulling up the Lichess players database, this position's only been reached 4 times of all the millions of games recorded in this database, and only reached twice in master games, it says. So anyway, so pretty rare. And like I said, this position's never been reached in my games because when we get this queen and this bishop are not here. So this is very, very unusual. But because this bishop is already out, Firouzja castles, so I get that. Okay, but now what's this queen doing over here? It's just weird. I don't know. Also, knight to d7 is a very common move in the Caro-Kann, and the cool thing about this is because we've moved the c-pawn, it doesn't restrict this queen's movement at all along this diagonal. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, knight to d7 is a normal move here. It's going to protect our e5 push. I understand that much about this move. It can protect either one of these. And we are going to want to move the e-pawn soon because we need to start developing these pieces to get our king over there. So d4, which it's unusual for it to take that long to be played here. But now that the king is gone, I mean, this queen's doing nothing, right? So I guess that's preventing e5. So now you're going to play e6, but I mean, e6 is a fairly common e-pawn move in the Caro-Kann. So nothing unusual here, again, except for the placement of that queen over there on a5. Now here, I don't know what again, I have never reached this exact position as black, so I don't know what white would do here. But I would assume that the c-pawn would go to one of these places, or maybe you would at some point want to try to kick this queen out. Not sure exactly how they'd want to do that, but Firouzja just went after this bishop immediately. And I guess the idea is that the bishop really doesn't have anywhere to go. All those squares are covered. So you have to choose, do I want to leave it here and damage the pawn structure somehow? Or do I want to put a knight out so when they take that I end up with a knight there and my pawn structure is intact? Or something else. And Carlsen chose something else, putting his bishop on d6, which that's a fairly normal position for the bishop. But again, usually that happens when the queen is right here protecting it. And this knight has already traded off for the other knight over here somehow. Because we see this a lot, and the bishop takes here, and then this knight's gone. And our queen is defending this bishop from behind. But nothing's attacking that square now, so it makes sense. And now Firouzja plays c4. I think now, since Firouzja's not taking this bishop, I think it makes sense to go ahead and get this knight out so we can castle. And that's what Stockfish is saying is the best move, but Magnus does this. He just puts his queen back on its home square. So my question is he trying to force this? Because now, I guess, obviously, the queen is hitting that. That's a pretty bright color. the queen is hitting that knight, so it's not really forcing that, but you'd think you'd want to do something at this point. But wait, look what Stockfish is suggesting. D5. What? Stockfish is saying let that knight hang. If that pawn pushed forward, like Stockfish is suggesting, that would give white a +1 advantage. And then what would happen if you took the knight? That's not what happened in this game, but why would Stockfish suggest that and just go ahead and let this knight hang? And then where's that pawn going to go? Let me just follow that out a second, out of curiosity. Well, it's one of the black's best moves is to take this, and then white's going to go here. Oh, and now the bishop's hanging? But you would bring this back to protect it, right? Oh, and then you would lose your knight to the pawn. Okay, and it would come with check. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, well, this was counted as an inaccuracy by Stockfish, and now, as you can see, if Firouzja finds this, it's +1. But Firouzja didn't find that. Firouzja played the next best move, which still gives him a small advantage, which was taking that bishop, which he didn't do for some reason on the previous turn, but now that Magnus was threatening the knight, he saw it. I don't know how many minutes are left in the game because there were no timestamps on this PGN file. In fact, as an aside, I had a really hard time finding a good, clean PGN file of this game. There's not, if there is a single database of all the Grandmaster games that have been played over the years or of certain time periods or certain players, I couldn't find it. I found a bunch of scattered databases, and some of the PGN files contained in those databases are really filled with lots of extraneous information that you can't just plug in and look at the game. And of course, on some of the sites where I found those PGN files, you can't download them because they're behind a paywall. So anyway, as frustrating as that was, this doesn't have timestamps on it, so. But yeah, so that's what Firouzja played, and Magnus plays the best move. That's the only move that's not a blunder. If you look at Stockfish's recommendations, if he takes with this pawn, that's a blunder. Flat out, +3 for white, for some reason. I guess because of the weakening of the king, I really don't know. But this is a normal move, maintains near equality, which is about all you can hope for. 10 to 12 moves in with the Caro-Kann, in my experience, unless the opponent blunders. Usually don't get exact equality from, according to Stockfish, until sometimes 15, 18 moves out. Okay, but now Firouzja sees d5 and plays it. And honestly, I don't know what I would do here, but what Magnus does is Stockfish's top move, puts the queen out there. And now that this h-pawn is out of the way, I mean, that's threatening checkmate. But of course, Firouzja is a grandmaster, does not hang checkmate in one. Moves the h-pawn. It's the only move that doesn't lose for white. I don't think, surely Magnus wasn't expecting him to do that. I mean, to fall for that, but I mean, Stockfish said it was a good place, as good a place as any to put that. I guess it's also hitting, no, the bishop's guarding that. I don't know what else the queen is doing over there, other than that one move threat. But, okay, now that that pawn has moved up, Stockfish is saying there's a huge difference between which pawn we take back with here. Now, we saw that over here when the bishop was captured there by the knight. There was a huge difference. The h-pawn taking was normal, was okay, maintained near equality. The f-pawn taking was a 3-point blunder, 4-point blunder. That's the same thing here, except that the difference isn't quite as much. Taking with the e-pawn is a mistake. It's more than a 1-point mistake. And taking with the c-pawn maintains near equality. I don't know what the difference is, and Magnus didn't either. And he took with the e-pawn. And that's counted as a mistake by the game review by Stockfish. And so Alireza is now up 1.5 points. Of course, he takes back with his c-pawn. Nothing else makes sense. And now you just move past? That's what Stockfish says. That's what Magnus did. Maybe because there's a, small version of Stockfish running in his brain somehow. I don't understand why you wouldn't have taken back. They would have taken back and then your bishop's hanging. I guess I understand that. But he knew somehow that was the best move. I don't know exactly what that does. Maybe you're planning on supporting it with the B pawn here in a little bit. Okay, Firouzja plays A4. I have no idea what I would do here as black. It says to get this knight out finally. You know what? Maybe that is what I would play. Maybe that's what I would play. These two knights then would guard each other. The queen is protecting the knight. The pawn's protecting the knight. It'd be a pretty well-placed knight for that matter. Well, Magnus had no idea what Stockfish, the little version running in his brain, didn't function right then. So that's counted as a blunder. Playing A5 here. I have no idea why that's counted as a blunder. Firouzja plays his best move. That pins the knight to the king. I don't know if it's threatening to trade off. But now he plays knight to F6, which protects this knight. Oh, and now we find out the reason why it was wrong to take with the e-pawn here. And that's because now the king can be checked down the e-file. Earlier, when he should have taken with the c-pawn, but he took with the e-pawn instead, this is why. And maybe I think we can assume that both Magnus and Firouzja would have seen that in a classical time control, but Magnus clearly didn't see that in the rapid time control. So the king has to move. One square is better. No, none of the squares are better. Doesn't matter. F8, D8. They're both still +3 for white. What would that do? That's what Stockfish is saying. Or even here, maintains the +3. Okay, well, Firouzja does that. Okay, that's why he moved his pawn earlier, was to get this rook out, I guess. I don't know which file it's going to go to, but he got it out. I guess he didn't want to move those two pieces, so he couldn't get the rook out that way. Had to get it out this way. Okay, well now Magnus Carlsen plays his best move, which is to bring this rook over. It's not doing anything over there anymore, right? That makes sense. I guess looking to trade off the rooks here. It is not one of Firouzja's best moves, but he does. I guess it was too tempting. Again, we don't know what the time control exactly was. And wow, look at what the engine is suggesting. There's a huge difference between taking back with the knight versus taking back with the king. Taking back with the king is the only move that's not a mistake. And he found it. I'm pretty sure I would have taken with the knight there, but there has to be some reason why that's not good. I'm not sure. Okay, and now two moves are good. Well, multiple moves are good for white, and Firouzja finds one of them. Not sure about that. When he moved this up here, I had assumed, for I don't know why, I had assumed maybe he was going to try to bring it over here to double with this other rook. But obviously that rook's gone now. It doesn't make sense. Not sure why he didn't come all the way over for check, but he liked it here for some reason. Maybe he wants to step up and threaten the queen, but I don't know what that would do. The queen's not trapped. It can easily work its way back around here. So I don't understand that move, but both Firouzja and Stockfish did. I'm looking. Yeah, other than the possibility of coming here, I really don't know. Doesn't seem to protect, threaten, prevent, or prepare anything from there other than this little one-move threat. Okay, and now Magnus needs to... Wow. According to Stockfish, Magnus's only move that's not a mistake or a blunder is offering the queen trade. Anything else, this is going to be at least a mistake, if not a blunder. Magnus plays the third best move, which is counted as a blunder. Look at that. +3 again. Why is that a blunder? Is it because it leaves this unprotected? Okay, so I did guess what Firouzja was about here. He plays rook to c4, threatening the queen. And there are only 2 squares that are not blunders to move the queen to. Okay, now I just realized that because this queen and this bishop are coming down here, and of course this knight is hitting that square, so there are only going to be two spaces that the queen could go to. But again, I had assumed it would come all the way to the corner if that rook moved up there, and that is what Magnus plays. But now he's behind +4. Okay. Firouzja plays his best move. How the heck did he know that was his best move? I mean, the bishop hasn't moved all game, and we're on move 22. So you got to move it somewhere. And I see why he didn't want to move it here, because it would have gotten captured. But why not here? Would have added some protection to that pawn, put a little bit of pressure over here. It would have been out of the way of the queen. But that was the best move. That's what he played. And would you... Black has to play this now. King to c7. Next best move is knight to e5. Oh, hitting the rook. Okay. Well, Magnus plays not one of those top 3 moves and puts this knight over here hitting the rook. That's a blunder. Don't know why. Perfectly fine to put the knight on e5 and threaten the rook. But bad, horrible to put it over here and threaten the rook. Okay. Honestly, I wouldn't have seen either one of those. I have no idea what I would have played in that position. Okay. Only one move maintains that plus 7.9 advantage for Firouzja, and it was that, and he played it. Bishop is protecting the rook. Queen has to go over here someplace. Wait, what? Oh, for a second there, moving the king was the best move on Stockfish's list. You saw that, right? Oh my goodness. But queen to f8 is now listed as the best move, but it's not much worse to play that. Oh no, now it's saying just take it. What? Okay. Well, I mean, Stockfish is smarter than Magnus Carlsen or me, but Magnus Carlsen played what it originally said and is now again saying is the best move. But yeah, look at that. It's saying it's just as it's plus 8-1 whether you move it out of the way or sacrifice there for the rook. That's bad. Well, he moved it over here, saving the queen for the time being. And Firouzja played his best move. This knight is pinned by the bishop, so it can't attack. And this knight is attacking both the knight and that, and of course the pawn too, but I assume the bishop is the one that's most under threat. I don't know. He needs to move his king to c7 or c8. Why is king c8 good? Wouldn't that just, I mean, yeah, you're going to take it back with your queen, but still. You can't move to d7, right? I could see going here, add an extra protection to the bishop. Knight to c8 adds a protection to the bishop. That makes sense. Pardon my pause. I heard a giant noise outside. I had to go check it out, but everything's okay. And as you can see, one reason that these kinds of videos take longer is because I'm looking at least 3 different things on every move. I'm looking at what I would play or what makes sense to me. I'm looking at what Stockfish recommends, and I'm looking at what they actually played in the game and trying to match those up. And sometimes they match up, sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes they're 3 different things. But yeah, so I do understand that. I do not understand the king to c8, but that is what Magnus played, which was one of the best moves that Stockfish recommended. I mean, I guess it gets it out of the pin. Okay, I understand it in that context. It gets it out of the pin. Makes sense. And now, I mean, Firouzja's just got a wealth of great moves. I don't get the third one. Do you see the third one that Stockfish is recommending? Rook to h8. Wait, it's not protected by anything down there, is it? Couldn't you just take it? No, you can't. That would have been nasty if he had found that. Because the queen's the only thing defending the bishop right now. Wow. If he takes, you get a check. Right? Let's just follow that line out. That's what Stockfish is recommending. Yeah, he could take, but if he does, you get this. And then where can the king go? I mean, he can go to any of those places. But if you go to this one, look at that. Fork of the king and queen. You lose the queen anyway. What happens if you go to b8? Then what happens? Takes that anyway. What? And then if we move the queen here, then what happens? Check. King to c8. Then king to d8. Then there. So they're just going to chop off all your pieces one by one. And you can't come up. So wherever you go, oh my goodness, if you go there, it's mate in 3 because the queen starts coming in. And if you go back, you can't go here because of the dark squared bishop, can't go there because of the light squared bishop. So if you go back here, it's going to do that again. And you're going to end up repeating, going here. And then what's going to happen? Bishop to c6. This is going to lock in and, oh my goodness, it's getting rough in there. Well, that didn't happen because Firouzja didn't see that. He saw the move that's slightly better than that, which was knight captures there. And if we assume the pawn's going to capture back, that's the best move. But then the bishop's going to capture back, and now these bishops are just cutting off stuff down here. And the queen hasn't even moved yet. White hasn't moved its queen at all. And black's best move is to put the king up here. I have no idea what I would have done here. No idea at all. One of black's moves is just to give the bishop up. Just get this bishop out of the way and just end it now. Oh my goodness. Just get rid of some of our extra material that's keeping this loss at bay. That's the second best move suggested up there. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, Magnus found the best one, which I don't think I would have found that. I don't know what I would have done. I might have resigned before this point. Because Magnus is only down a pawn, though. He's only down a pawn. But it is time, Firouzja thought, to bring the queen into the game. Stockfish wants this, but it also wants queen to f3. It's kind of changing its mind. It's switching those moves around. Or queen to b3. Both of those, I mean, obviously that rook one hits this pawn. I'm trying to look at what these queen moves do. I guess they both protect that d pawn, which isn't guarded right now. I mean, no, it is guarded right now. Huh. Okay. Well, both of those moves continue protecting the d pawn. I'm not sure what else they do. Really don't know. And of course, I mean, black can't move this knight, so this pawn is stuck. I mean, this is a depressing position. I can see why it rates white high, but +7, I don't know. He didn't play any of those. He played that, which continues defending this pawn, but it also defends this one now. But that was, I don't know what queen to d2 did. I have no idea. Maybe he didn't know what else to do, and he was in time trouble. He's like, I have to move something, and he just moved it. I don't know. That happens sometimes. And Magnus is now supposed to go here. where the bishop will just take it and the king will take the bishop. Wow. Oh, I really don't know. Really don't know. Okay, I do see going back a move that the rook could set up this to threaten the queen. It could also, in conjunction with the queen move. Wow, I'm bad at drawing arrows today. These two together would both hit this pawn if that dark squared bishop ever got out of the way. That's the only thing I could think about. My brain was still trying to figure that out in the background while I was looking at this knight to d7. It threatens that unprotected bishop, so the other bishop would just trade off for it. Wow. Okay. Well, Magnus didn't find that. He played what? That just removes one of the squares your knight can possibly go to. I'm honestly surprised that it didn't take off more points for that. What does that do at all? No idea. Well, now Firouzja finds rook to h7, which again was suggested as one of the top moves. Oh, well, now that the queen has moved, the f-pawn's undefended. So does he have to move the queen back? Yes, Magnus has to move the queen back, threatening the rook and the pawn. So now what does he do? Now he's supposed to go to rook g7, guarded by the bishop. That's nice. With the rook here and that protecting it, blockading this pawn. Pretty nice. But Firouzja plays that, which was counted as an inaccuracy by Stockfish. But it just wins the queen, no? Because there's no escape. You can't escape. So you have to take it, and then they're going to take you. Oh, but then you're going to get the bishop too, so you're going to get two pieces. Okay. I can see why that's counted as not the best move, because Magnus takes, he takes back, and he takes back with his rook. But Firouzja's now up 2 points of material, where he was just up 1 point of material. One difference, though, is that Magnus has an extra piece, but still way down in the Stockfish evaluation. And now it is time. Oh, that's why Firouzja put it there. This undefended pawn was sitting there, but it wasn't undefended yet, because the rook was still here. So, but it's undefended now because he did this little trade over here. Now, somebody, it might have been Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, I think, calls that like a type 2 undefended piece, where at the time he moved his queen up to d2, that pawn was defended. But he had a way of getting that defender off of that square, and that was putting his rook down here, guarded by the bishop, where the queen was here. That little trade we just saw. All of that not only gained him 1 point of material over there in that trade, 2 lesser pieces for the queen, but it undefended the pawn. So now he's 3 points of material ahead. Okay, I get that. That was Stockfish's best move, and Magnus found it. Where's he going? Where's he going? Oh, is he trying to trap the queen? Is that what it's about? Well, just for example, this isn't what happened, but let's just say, yeah, that's what that's for, is to trap the queen. Because now the queen can't get out. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, Firouzja would have seen that, so he gets the queen out of there. Yes, he gets the queen out to e1. Still has a significant advantage. But now that white rook over here and that other white bishop over here are gone, Magnus has a little more freedom to move these pieces, so he offers that trade now. Firouzja didn't take it. He threatens the rook instead. The rook goes all the way back. I guess protecting against that infiltration, which could have happened, maybe. Maybe, I don't know. But now that the knight's out of the way, there's a check right here. And that's what Firouzja found, but that is not what Stockfish wanted. but it didn't matter that much. You have to go back with the knight to block it. I guess he could have pushed the pawn, right? He could have pushed the pawn, but then you check back here, and the pawn can't come backwards. So yeah, you basically have to put the knight back there. Then you come here. What does that do? Oh, aiming at the rook. Okay, surely Magnus saw that. He did see it and took a free pawn. Nice. Oh, aiming at this. There's no way to protect that pawn. Okay. And this is where the game ended. I don't know if the PGN file just says it's finished. So I don't know if they, surely I guess Magnus resigned at this point. Also, again, I don't have the clocks. It was interesting. I saw some things that I normally wouldn't have seen. The biggest surprise to me was way back on move 3 when Magnus plays this out of the Caro-Kann opening. And again, I really don't understand the point of it, and maybe never will, even if he explained it to me. Because again, he was already defending this pawn from his home square, so it can't be that. It can't be pinning this knight because the knight's defended multiple ways. The only thing I could think of is that he has a propensity for changing the move orders on relatively common openings. And sometimes move 8 or move 12 of Caro-Kann positions, this queen does end up here. So maybe that's what he was looking for. I'm not going to try this in my Caro-Kann games. Again, it's not listed in any of the books. And when I looked in the player database, it was very rare that this position had arisen. It's just to you can see the engine here at this point, the normal moves. This is what Lee Chess's Stockfish likes the most. Here in this, when I have reached this position maybe 3 times, I've always just taken the e-pawn at this point. Or knight, it says knight to f6 is fine, but none of them are this. And when I open up the player's database here, the queen going out to a5 is not among the top 12 most common moves. Yeah, not the top 12 most common moves in that position. So think about all the legal moves available in this position. And there are quite a few because all these pawns can move 1 or 2 squares. This pawn can move 2 different places. This knight can move 2 different places. This bishop can move a bunch. There's a bunch of legal moves, but of the moves that make sense here, that's not in the top 12 in the player's database. And once you move that, even in the player's database, you're down to something like 49 games. No, sorry, 89 games. And here the most common thing to do is to take this pawn. And the next most common is what Firouzja did. And now you're down to just like a handful of games in the database. I think 7 here. Yeah, so very uncommon even among players, but absolutely unheard of on the Masters database to put that out there. So I have no explanation for that whatsoever. So I don't think I got a lot of illumination other than I am starting to learn some of the lines of the Caro-Kann because I do know all about this and about that knight then going back here and my bishop dropping back here. I've become a little familiar with those, so I guess that's good news. All right. Even though it was a 15-minute rapid game, I'm surprised also that Magnus Carlsen made as many mistakes as he did. Maybe once you get to that level and you're so accustomed to having tons of time to calculate, and you see them on the video sitting at the table for 23 minutes or whatever for one move, and at the end they'll just move the pawn that everybody thought they should have moved in the first place. But since most of my games are 10-minute rapids, it seems odd to me that there would be this kind of hesitation from a grandmaster in a 15-minute rapid game. But thank you for watching. Hopefully the new setup recorded correctly. Again, I have moved some things around. The lighting is slightly different than normal, and I'm going to get used to it. But again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.